Sorry to interrupt. Everyone have the card.
We are live. Yes.
Everyone has their card keys. Okay, just making sure, because I found some, I didn't know if it was one of you guys. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Just making sure, sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It is Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, and I now call to order the 2112 regular meeting of the City of College Place City Council. Clerk, please take roll call.
Mayor Hernandez,
Present.
Councilmember Jessup,
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland,
Here.
Councilmember Sherman,
Wow, that went quick. I'm here.
Councilmember Williams,
Present.
Councilmember Boyle,
Present.
and Council members Espinoza and Peterson have asked to be excused. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Will you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Now time for public comment. Jerry, did anybody submit a comment in advance?
I did not receive any public comments.
Okay. If anyone in attendance, in actual attendance or in virtual attendance would like to speak, please raise your hand now. If you are on the phone, *9 will raise your hand.
There's no one in the attendees list.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then we're going to move on to consent agenda, which consists of the agenda for tonight, February 14th, 2023, the council minutes from January 24th, 2023, the council workshop minutes from February 7th, 2023, the transfer of Pocket iNet franchise to Lightspeed Internet LLC, the bid award for a new tri-mower from RDO Equipment, November 22nd, November 2022, check register financial report, the appointment of Tracy Warner to the Economic Development, Tourism and Events Commission, the appointment confirmations of John Nickel and Monica Boyle to the Lodging Tax Advisory Commission, and excusing the absence of council members Espinoza and Councilmember Peterson. Are there any items that anyone would like removed from the consent agenda at this time? If not, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
All motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Heather.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Any?
Hi.
I went a little fast.
I didn't hear member Boyle, so
She said aye. I saw her. I saw her mouth immediately.
Yep. Hi.
thank you.
Okay. All right, the ayes have it and the motion is passed. We have no presentations tonight, so we're just gonna keep on moving. We have one public hearing tonight. The requested vacate Micaiah Court right of way. Is that how you say Micaiah?
Mackay Court.
Micaiah Court right of way. Ms. Evans, you're up.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, Northeast Mackay Court was constructed, I believe, in 2019. And at that time, the city ended up with an additional 10 feet of right of way on the corner of Mackay Court and Maple. And it's right of way that we don't need. We don't have the use for it. It's currently encumbered by a public utility easement. So that means that you can't build on it per se. But the adjacent property owners, the Kernicks, have petitioned to have the right of way vacated. And so that process would involve the city turning over the right of way to the previous owner, which would be Brandon Stepper. But the Kernicks and the Steppers came to an agreement where they signed over the rights to that essentially. So the city is considering vacating this right of way back to the Kernicks. all the adjoining property owners, sign the petition, which in this case is just one property. The city really doesn't have a use for the right of way. If anything, maintenance staff would be on the hook for maintaining it, potentially spraying it for weeds and taking care of it, so. That's kind of the overall gist of it.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments at this time? Ms. McAndrews? All right. Sherry, did anyone submit a comment in advance on this topic?
I did not receive any comments.
Okay, there's still no one in virtual attendance?
Nope.
Okay, is there anybody in actual attendance that would like to speak?
I'm Mr. Koenig. I can answer any questions if anyone has any, but I don't feel the need to add anything to it.
Okay,
Thank you for coming though.
yeah, absolutely. Any questions? All right. Any additional discussion, if there hasn't been any discussion? All right. Is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved, Councilmember Williams.
Second, Councilmember Boyle.
Didn't even open it.
Protocol,
Okay, where's that at?
That need to open before I said my piece. Okay.
Okay. Hold on, let me see where I'm at. All right, so that's under action items, right? Or is it under now?
Public hearings.
Yeah, okay. I follow scripts, so too much. Okay, then at this time, I will open the public hearing. And is there any comments during the public hearing?
I did not receive any comments and there's no one in the attendees list.
Okay, that's where I was missing. Yeah, okay. If there's no discussion, is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Councilmember Jessup.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, unanimous, the ayes have it, and the hearing is closed. Next is action items, so we'll move on to, we have several items on the agenda tonight. So the first one is the vacation of Northeast Micaiah Court right away by Mr. McAndrews.
So, I mean, again, I don't need to repeat all of that unless you want me to, but this is just the action to vote to formally, I guess, to adopt the resolution vacating the right of way. So,
Thank you. All right, any questions or comments at this time from council members? All right, if there's no discussion, is there a motion on this action item?
Motion to adopt resolution number 23-006, vacating 10 feet of road right of way along the north side of Northeast Micaiah Court.
Thank you. There's a second?
I'll second Boyle.
Great, thank you. Any discussion at this point? All right, hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, unanimous, the ayes have it and the motion is passed. All right, you're the proud owner. Seem to be proud of me.
Have a nice evening, everybody.
You as well, thank you for being here. All right, the next item is the Meyer contract addendum 2. Mr. Rickard, you're presenting.
Good evening. So at the workshop earlier this month, I presented the conceptual addition plans that Meyer Architecture provided with us as background. Here, they are the architectural and engineering firm on record for the council renovation project, and phase 2 of that was the remodel of the jail cell area into office space and a small addition in the northeast corner for administrative offices in the mayor's office. Just with our growing needs at City Hall, even with the phase two that I just mentioned, we would pretty much be maxed out really quickly on office space with, so Mr. Rizzatello authorized Meyer this summer to come up with the conceptual that's in the packet. And we are recommending that we move forward with the phase two amendment to include an expansion to the east side of the building. That would provide roughly 8 additional office spaces, reconfiguring existing office space, a larger break room area, since we'd be adding more office space, and we lost an break room on the east side of the building for the city attorney's office. So it's roughly 2,600 square feet of new office space. And of course, conversion of the jail cell area and Sally Ward area. The amount of the design, so this is $197,000. That would include the full plans and also assistance on the bidding process and construction management if we do move forward with construction. And that would be at the earliest construction would be in 2025, 2024. So we do design this year and possibly build next year. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Rickard? All right. If there's no discussion, do we have a motion?
All motion to authorize Mayor Hernandez to execute the Meyer Architecture and Engineering Contract Addendum to Agreement for Services, Revision 2, in the amount of $197,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Any additional discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 The ayes have, it's unanimous. The ayes have it and the motion is passed.
I didn't hear Councilman Williams.
She was the last aye. Councilmember Boyle, can you vote again?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Gonna get really sticky offices at some point. Thank you. Okay, next is the change order for agreement for consultant services with PBS Engineering from a John Muir Road reconstruction. And Mr. McAdams, you're up again?
Yeah, so I think you are all fairly familiar with the fact that we are an engineering, have an engineering agreement with PBS for the Majorna Road reconstruction from College Avenue to the city limits at Blueview. Part of that involves some geotech work, some subsurface exploration to determine how we're going to stabilize the bank at the west end of the project under Blueview. There's a fairly steep bank on the edge. And so we need to engineer that as we build a new road to make sure it's strong enough and will withhold the road and everything that gets put on top of it. And so through those original geotech investigations, I guess, we kind of determined that there could be a potential hazard to the roadway, and to make sure that we engineered it appropriately, PBS proposed doing some additional geotech work, basically going down deeper to really make sure, rather than making an educated guess, really making sure that we are designing that to be sturdy and stable. And so to do that, there's some additional costs in the amount of $27,441.37. So that would bring the engineering contract from $364,924.86 to $392,366.23. So the capital facility plan that was adopted allocated $711,000 for that project this year. We have grants that are covering a big portion of it as well, so. I guess that's where, any questions?
Any questions for Mr. McAndrews? Councilmember Jessup?
Was it just that, when they first originally looked at it, they bored it and looked at it, and then they thought it was okay, and then the more and more we dug into it, and realized, wow, we gotta go a little bit deeper to.
Well, they bore in and do a bunch of samples, and to be honest, I'm not an expert on all the geotech stuff, but their results indicated that it could be hazardous, and so
Yeah.
we want to make sure that when we construct new, that there, there's not an earthquake or a heavy rain or something, and that bank slides, then we lose our new road and utilities and anything like those, and that's, or worse,
Sure, that's
somebody's
like the
driving on it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Oh, you're fine.
So like the additional cost is essentially just like after they had, we paying for the original, taking a look at it, and then once they've done that, the results of them investigating, we realized, like, we need to go a little bit deeper, we need to find out a little bit more, so that's what this additional cost is.
That's exactly it. So the original drill rig they brought into the boring would only go so deep. So they have to bring in a different drill rig that gives them the ability to drill deeper and to sample the soil all the way down below the bottom of the bank.
Mr. Cleveland, questions or comments?
No question.
Councilmember Sherman, any questions or comments?
Nope, thank you.
Councilmember Boyle?
No, no questions. Thanks.
I do have a question. So this is an exploration. So they go in, they test, and what's the possibility to be found? So let's say it's found that we need to do something. Are they thinking like we need to build a retaining wall?
Well, that's just it. So our options at this point, or potential options would be it could be a retaining wall, it could be stabilizing the bank with large rocks and kind of enforcing the base of the grade and building it up so that we know that it's going to be stable. But we won't know until they do these additional explorations, so this will allow them to engineer it appropriately. And if it's going to be a retaining wall, then we'll have to incur those costs. And if it can just be bringing in some boulders and reinforcing it, then there may be some savings there. There may not be, I don't know at this point. So
Sure, but there may be additional costs once the exploration is done.
yeah, it'll help us determine what construction will have to happen when we move on to the construction phase, and even potential right-of-way acquisition if we have to acquire more right-of-way outside of that bank.
Got it.
So that we can safely stabilize it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there any additional discussion? Okay, is there a motion on this change order request?
I'll make the motion to authorize Public Works Director to sign change order number 1, increasing the contract for engineering services with PBS by $27,441.37.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Any additional discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it and the motion is passed. Thank you, Robert. Next is the contract amendment number 7, water system consolidation and well number 2 relocation.
Yeah, so this is, the title of this gets a little confusing because this is regarding what we all typically refer to as our well number 6. But if you recall, well 6 is the relocation of well 2. So the contract documents and funding and everything is in reference to the well number 2 relocation. So what this is RH2 is our engineering has been providing construction engineering and design engineering services and reviewing certified payrolls as Nelson Construction's been building the well house. And over the course of the last year, there have been some serious supply chain issues, and some of the major components, even from the get-go, that we knew there were going to be long lead items. I think going out to October of last year, and ship dates have been pushed. and the project has taken longer. And so now we're looking at some ship dates of some of these important items out into March, April, May of this year. Which is resulting in RH2 engineering running out of the engineering funds we had offer, getting close to running out of the engineering funds we had authorized. And so they put together a proposal for an amendment. And so I believe Kyle Smith from RH2 is joined us virtually. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kyle. And I think a representative from Nelson is also online. So I've asked them to join us to kind of explain how we got to where we got to, why this is necessary, and help answer whatever questions. So Kyle, if you don't mind.
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Robert. And thank you, council members, for having me speak tonight. As Robert stated, I am Kyle Smith with RH2 Engineering. I've been working on the City of College Place project since 2017. I've been the project manager on the city's loop water main project and the 2 well drilling projects, including the well drilling for well number 6 here. The first item on our task amendment is the additional construction costs incurred by the delay in delivery of the electrical equipment. We're currently waiting for the delivery of the emergency generator, the variable frequency drive, and the main switchboard, or MSB. So the MSB supplies power to the entire pump station and is our current critical path item. So historically, lead times for an MSB would be about 6 to 9 months. And those lead times were used when we kind of developed our initial project schedule with the contract working days kind of being on the shorter side of that, in hopes that we were going to have well 6 operational by late summer 2022. When the MSB was ordered in January of 2022, there was an estimated 200 working days, or approximately 9-month lead time. So we had anticipated a delivery date in October. However, the MSB is now scheduled to be shipped from Mexico on May 25th of this year. And we're anticipating a project completion date around mid-July. So that's about 30 weeks past our estimated project completion date, based on that initial 200 working day lead time that we originally received for the MSB. While this delay is excessive, I will say that we are seeing this on other projects, and now assume, this kind of electrical equipment will take 12 to 16 months to get here. So that's kind of the first part of our task amendment. So in summary, that kind of covers our cost for this extended 30 weeks of construction, for our construction observation and any administrative work that we need to complete. The second part of our task covers additional work requested by the Washington State Department of Health as part of their Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. So the funding comes with some stipulations, including that all construction workers get paid the highest of either federal or prevailing state wages, depending on their job classification. So in October 2022, almost a year after we started construction, Department of Health emailed the city asking them to sign a form stating that all certified payrolls submitted with the DWRS reimbursement packet were reviewed for compliance with prevailing wage statutes. And so while we at RH2 had given wage rate interviews, collected the certified payrolls, and spot checked some wages kind of earlier on in the project, we were not tasked with thoroughly reviewing every payroll, as that had not been required on any of the other DWSRF projects, including the other 2 well drilling projects or the city's loop water main project. So this task now involves us collecting and reviewing the weekly certified payrolls from the contractor and all their subcontractors. And then we review them against the state and federal wage rates to ensure compliance. And after that, we provide the payrolls to the city with an email stating all of the payrolls have been reviewed, and then they can sign the form requested by DOH and submit it with the DWRSF packet for reimbursement. So that's kind of the big picture of what's included in this task amendment. If you guys have any questions or would like any further details on the amendment or the electrical equipment, I'd be happy to answer those. And I think Nelson's also in attendance, so they could possibly answer some or provide some further clarification as well if needed.
You're gonna have Nelson, or
Yeah, I mean, if Nelson wouldn't mind just giving a little overview on the project and what they've done to try to contact these suppliers and manufacturers to expedite the shipping and getting these components, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Sergio here with Nelson Construction. I have John Nelson here with me as well. Just to recap, as Kyle already stated, initially we had received some longer lead time estimated delivery dates in the 10+ months range, and as we've progressed down the production with our suppliers and manufacturers, it has escalated essentially. We are looking at March timeframe for a couple of the main components: the variable frequency drive and the generator, and the MSB/ATS is estimated for a May timeframe. Really, it's boiling down to items that are out of our control, out of our first tier subcontractor, second tier supplier. It's really a global issue, as we're seeing, and can substantiate with other projects. So really, that's our effort. We've tried to expedite as best we can. Same with our first tier subcontractors, just to no avail.
Thank you, Sergio.
all right. Let's go to council members for any questions or comments. And Councilmember Jessup.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here on your evening, and thank you for the presentation. Obviously, I mean, one of the longest lead times I heard was 12 to 16 months. It's terrible. I mean, so in essence, if I understood correctly, in simplistic terms, because kind of simple that way, the state mandated a little bit of increase in wages. The lead times have increased the time in which engineers and so on and so forth need to be on the project. In looking at compliance to match and be in compliance with those said wages, the increased fees, $109,910. That's in essence what I'm hearing.
So yeah, so the state mandated some increased review of payrolls, and so that's what Kyle from RH2 was referencing. The state came in and said somebody needs to review every payroll and make sure people are getting paid what they're supposed to be paid, and so that we tasked RH2 with that because they were already accepting those payrolls. And so that's additional work that RH2 had to do that wasn't in the initial.
So based on the state mandate, the city is on the hook for paying the additional work. And I assume with that additional mandate doesn't come additional funds from the state.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's,
Okay.
Unfortunately, no.
So that's,
But so that, I mean, that's one part of it. The other part is that the project, because of these delays, we kept working, but things weren't coming in when they needed to, or when they were originally scheduled to. And so there was additional engineering and construction engineering and observation happening. And now the project is shut down. It's on hold until these critical components come in. But RH2, and Kyle, maybe you can step in, is looking at, looking forward at, okay, when this kicks back on, it's going to be all hands on deck, go, go, go. And you're going to have some increased time on site. And it's going to take more time and hence more money than before. Is that accurate, Kyle? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's a good summary. Like Robert said, we are shut down right now. There are still some administrative items that we need to take care of. We still need to submit that DWSRF packet every month with invoices and the certified payrolls, even though no one's getting paid. There's still other, just correspondence going back and forth between the contractor and us and the suppliers. We've tried to do what we can to expedite some of these electrical equipment items too, based on the relationships we have with some of the suppliers. But then, so then there's going to be this big push start in March all the way till mid-July to get this project wrapped up, including testing and startup of the pump station. And that's always kind of a heavy, time consumptive task, right? Is we're trying to troubleshoot everything and make sure this is up and running and ready to go. So this task tries to capture all of that and ensure we have enough funds there available to get us to the finish line.
And I might add, Kyle and I have talked about this, and neither one of us wants to be back in front of you guys asking for more money again. So again, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is intended to be a somewhat conservative estimate to make sure that we capture all the time. This is not to exceed cost, correct, Kyle?
That's a do not to exceed cost, right? We always bill on time and material. We were able to stretch our last contract out a little farther than we anticipated, but we just can't absorb 30 extra weeks of construction.
So our hope is certainly that it comes in at less than that, but
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Councilmember Cleveland.
Paul, has my question, sorry. I don't think you need to apologize for that. Yeah, no question.
Councilmember Williams, and my apologies that I've been skipping over you.
No
I
worries.
forgot you were online after all. My apologies.
I am capable of speaking up if I feel the need. I think this is totally reasonable, no questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sherman,
I agree with Melody. Thanks, everyone.
Councilmember Boyle.
Same, no questions, thanks.
All right, any additional comments or questions? All right, hearing none, let's vote. Or let's get a motion on this motion to authorize.
Oh, I'll make a motion unless someone, okay.
Go ahead, make your motion, Heather.
Okay, I thought someone else was speaking. Okay, I'll make a motion to authorize Public Works Director to sign contract amendment number 7, increasing the engineering fee authorization by $109,910 for the well 2 relocation.
I'll second
Thank you.
Boyle.
Great, thank you. Any additional discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Here, Councilmember Williams.
Sorry, aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimous, the ayes have it and the motion is passed. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you taking the time to be here and help us understand the situation.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.
You have a good night.
thank you guys.
All right, next on the agenda, Ms. Caldwell present the acceptance of the downtown and Stone Creek tax increment finance project analysis and authorized transmissions to the state treasurer's office.
Thank you, Mayor. We have Bob Stowe, I believe, available, as well as Finance Director Carlton, if anyone has any questions. And I think we're all pretty well versed with TIF right now. I'm getting nods from the gallery. So what I'm asking of council today is that we accept the financing study that was done by Bob Stowe, and that we transmit that to the state treasurer for review. They have up to 90 days to comment on it. Then we'll bring that back to you with any comments. And at a future date, the plan is to ask that we actually designate the tax increment area for the TIF and proceed accordingly. So I won't beat the dead horse, right? If anyone has any questions for me, for Mr. Stowe or Brian.
All right, let's go through council members. Councilmember Jessup,
No, but thank you for being available and reminding us.
Councilmember Cleveland,
No question.
Councilmember Williams,
I can't, my only question is where is my unmute button, but no questions.
Only you can answer that question, Melanie.
Only took me 3 tries.
Councilmember Sherman,
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Boyle.
No questions, thanks.
All right, well, I wanted to have a long list of questions for you, just to kind of make you sweat a little bit.
Thank you.
But if there's no additional discussion, let's vote. No. Is there a motion? I can't, this is the second time I've done this. Is there a motion on, let's see, what is this considered? A resolution?
A motion to adopt resolution number 23-007, which accepts the downtown and Stone Creek tax increment financing project analysis and authorizes community outreach as well as transmission of report to state treasurer's office for review.
Great. Is there a second? Anybody want a second for Tiff?
Second, Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? All right, now let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. The ayes have it and the motion is passed. Thank you, Ms. Cola. Appreciate all the work you put into that. Just tell Mike you have to work really hard to answer and to convince us that we were like traveling there. All right, next is the interlocal agreement with the city of Walla Walla to develop an equitable rate to send treated wastewater to Walla Walla. And Mr. McAndrews is up again.
Yeah, so again, I think you guys are all pretty familiar with our concept and our ongoing discussions with the city of Walla Walla about regionalizing our wastewater treatment plant. As a little bit of a reminder, we have to move forward, get started on some of the projects that are associated with our current treatment plant that would have to happen regardless this year. So we're working towards moving forward on that. Simultaneously, through our ongoing discussions with Walla Walla, we need to come to some sort of an agreement for what would essentially be an interim or temporary, I guess, fee or cost for them to take our treated effluent until I think the idea is that we were looking towards forming a sewer district, but that's going to take some time. And we need to decide if we're going to move forward with building a pipeline to Walla Walla or with the rest of the treatment plant upgrades. And so Walla Walla reached out to the FCS group and asked them to provide an estimate to do essentially some sort of a rate study to come up with I guess recommendations on how we should enter into an agreement, or if we should, and how what that might look like. So they're considering a couple different options. One would be or 2 different models. One would be a cash-based pricing model where College Place would be treated as a large retail customer, taking into account the reduced strength of the wastewater since we'd be sending treated effluent. The other one would be utility-based pricing model where College Place would be responsible for a proportionate share of the operating expenses, depreciation of or expenses of the assets that are used to Walla Walla's assets that are used to convey our treated effluent, and then a rent for us using their system. So they're going to look at those 2 options and put together a memo that kind of documents their findings. This is supposed to include, I think, 3 virtual workshops with city staff at both Walla Walla and College Place, as well as 2 workshops with council, one of which would be in person and one of which would be virtual. So the overall cost estimate from the FCS group was $46,600. This interlocal would give a cost share, 50-50 cost, where each city would be responsible for the $23,300. So half of that. And so Yeah, again, this is kind of a measure. There's lots of, as I've talked with the city of Walla Walla and JV engineers. This leaves us lots of off ramps. So this is kind of the first hurdle we have to get through to determine feasibility. And if we can't come to an agreement with Walla Walla and what that might look like, that might be we're gonna stop right here and we're gonna decide to proceed with our own wastewater treatment plant. And so really, until we have this study, we're not gonna have enough information to decide if we should move forward, so.
All
Any
right,
questions?
Councilmember Jessup,
No, thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland,
Yeah, so we're basically contributing to the cost that it would take to determine what the rate would be. And is that if we are being billed by the city of Walla Walla, or if we are creating a regional utility? And then that utility is billing both of us?
So this would ultimately be, again, this would be an interim or temporary, at least that's how we're looking at it, as temporary, I think. Depending on what the study says, and at that point, how long we're figuring it's gonna take to come up with a regional sewer district that would serve both cities. This would just
So
be,
like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
this would just be figuring out a model. And which essentially would help figure out a rate or a cost. For us to either become a customer of theirs or like a large retail customer essentially, which is what they're calling the cash-based pricing model versus a utility-based pricing model where we're sharing in expenses. And so, and then kind of paying rent. So I think regardless what this study is going to come back with is there will be a cost to us to send our treated effluent to Walla Walla, but we don't know what that's going to look like. So this will give some options where then we can really consider, okay, does this make sense? Is this going to pencil out for us? Is this something we want to proceed with? Or is this just out of the question? And never mind, let's construct our own treatment plant upgrades and stay, our own wastewater utility.
I think I'm still a little bit confused because I'm trying to figure out. Is this rate looking at or presuming that the city of Walla Walla is going to retain complete ownership and control of their wastewater utility, or is this like combining and creating a wastewater like regional utility?
So this is for now that they're going to retain their own utility and we're gonna be a user or customer of it.
Until we figure out if it makes sense to.
Because we have to move forward with our plant upgrades or treatment plant upgrades regardless. And we have some deadlines from ecology on that we have to meet. And we know that those discussions about creating our own individual sewer district that would be Walla Walla's customers and our customers. It's essentially creating a new utility, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways it could look, so I shouldn't say it's creating a new utility, but it's gonna be complicated discussions, and it's not gonna be a just simple decision, and so we know that's gonna take some time, but we have to start moving on one way or the other, so. If
There has to be essentially a pipeline constructed before we could even
Mhm.
figure out
So
what
this,
the rate would be for its use.
yes. Before there could be a rate, there has to be a pipeline constructed, but this is looking at, the big picture of if we're sending our treated effluent to them and they're running it through their treatment plant and then discharging it to accordingly, what's that going to cost and what are the different models, a couple different models with different cost options. And so again, from our standpoint, we're looking at this as a temporary measure, but if we can't even come to an agreement, if it's gonna be some outrageous number that doesn't make sense for us to even do that, then that may be the thing that tells us we're gonna go a different direction. I mean, we're hoping that it all makes sense, and I think the big picture in the long run, there's gonna be some benefits if we can regionalize, but it has to make sense for both parties and all of their rate payers.
Councilmember Williams?
I have a question that kind of, I think builds off of Mac's question. It seems to me that before we do a utility, we're going to have to do a rate study that looks at what it would look like if the utility is operating both facilities and potentially taking advantage of that to postpone upgrades at Walla Walla. So it seems to me like if we do this study now and then we do that study a year from now, like 2/3 of that study will be repeating this study. So it seems to me like we should include that in this study because it would be more time for the consultants, but like the meetings, I don't think it would add any to the meetings. So I'm just curious as to why. Obviously, we would take a phased approach to anything that we do, but it seems like this is a point where phasing, getting the information would add to the cost, and I don't see a benefit. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, that's a very good point. I'm not really sure how to answer that or to address that. I imagine that the information that would come from this study would still be useful and would reduce the amount of the future study. But you make a good point. There could be some savings if it was all grouped into one. We are under some time deadlines and having to keep this process moving forward. So I think that's partly why the idea was to move forward with this study now, get some information, and again, it gives us that off ramp early on without too much investment if it's just not looking like it's going to make sense.
Mr. Carlton would like to speak.
Mr. Carlton?
Yeah, if I can just chime in on that. The regionalization study would be far more complex than the study that they're looking at now. This is just kind of setting of a base as an alternative to not going with the regional plan, but just seeing what it would cost us to ship that effluent to Walla Walla. When you're getting into a regionalization study, there's a lot more people. It'll be a lot more in depth because you're basically having to decide what portions of your system are going to be regionalized, whether it's the whole thing or everybody's pipes and mains, and it's very complicated. And this was being done just to get us to a point where we can get some sort of base decision. Can we even afford it at that point?
And I'm not sure that we actually voted on this. I remember discussing it at a workshop, but I thought we're pretty solid on the policy choice that just being a customer was not really an option, because regardless of what the prices are set now, we completely lose control. So that's why I was surprised to see a study of just being a customer.
No, and I totally understand that. And I had a phone call with the Public Works Director at City Walla earlier today to confirm that their concept of this was a temporary concept as well. We've made it clear to them that we're not interested in becoming a customer of theirs. But if we do build a pipeline to Walla Walla and start sending them treated effluent, or I guess if we commit to building that pipeline, then we're committing to, it's a large investment. And so
But I was under the impression that the way the loans, et cetera, have been structured, we had about 2 years before we had to push the go, no go on the pipeline. And during that time is when we were going to decide whether or not regionalization was an option.
I believe one of the things we were talking about is that we wanted to wait for Walla Walla to do their study.
Yeah, Walla Walla is working on what's called a facility study, which is gonna give some idea of what upgrades to their treatment plant are going to be needed and what over a period of time. And so that will help us with that study as well. If a regional sewer district is created, those upgrades are gonna fall onto the ratepayers, all of them in that district. And so those upgrades to their treatment plant, if our customers become their ratepayers, that falls on our customers as well. And so
So when would, shouldn't this study wait until we have that information? I don't understand the timing here.
If I remember correctly, and this might not be correct, this is pretty cool, is, I think Walla Walla is just as in, is in just about as bad position as we are with our facility, that they actually are going to have to do major upgrades.
not as significant is my understanding, but they are working on this or planning to work on this facilities study, which will tell them some more long-term upgrades that need to happen is how I understand it.
And so I think that maybe this agreement to do this rate study is not necessarily beneficial to either city over the other. And it's kind of, again, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is just going from memory. It's, we want to find this out before we go down one road or the other, which could be very, very expensive for both cities. Is that
Well,
kind of
but-
like?
But based, and I agree with that overall concept, but based on the engineer's report that we had at our UTAC meeting last week or the week before, my understanding was that it was deliberately set up so that we would not have to pull the trigger on, do we build the pipeline or the upgrades for at least a couple of years to give all of those things time to happen. So this study seems premature because the only way that we would be sending effluent to Walla Walla would be that we had agreed to regionalization, but it wasn't done by the time we had the pipe done, right?
Yes, that would be correct.
So I don't understand spending money to figure out how much we would pay when we haven't even decided the regionalization or no regionalization yet. It feels like this is out of order. Not out of order as in not allowed, but out of order as in chronologically in the wrong place.
Yeah, and I have to agree with Melody, is I question paying for them to do a study on what it would be like if we were a customer home. We already know we're not gonna agree to that anyways. That we won't want to be a customer. It's gonna have to be what is called, I suppose, the utility-based pricing model. So why have them do a study as a customer if we're not going to go that direction?
But, and the utility-based pricing model, the concern I had with that is it only talks about College Place sharing Walla Walla's costs and not a full utility.
Correct. I believe that's how I'm reading it as well.
Councilmember Jessup?
A separate thought in terms of, so we've had our conversations with the Department of Health then that we were intending or hoping to We had all that little bit of a switch or turnover in the city of Walla Walla, so I assume that's conversations happened. And with that being said, remind me of the timeline, because it seems as if you introduced it as a pressing manner.
Yeah,
So what's the timeline?
I believe we have to get started on it this year.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, started on what?
On the treatment plant upgrades. And so, I wish I had those deadlines in front of me.
So the part of the conversation was, they said, hey, this year, we're telling you, you need to start on those upgrades. So nothing of the upgrades or so on and so forth is able to be started without what?
No, we are able to start on these upgrades. So the city has been in conversations with JEB engineers who
Yeah.
did the full engineering on it. And we have talked about which items we're going to pull out and hold off on. And there's a handful of things that, if we don't go forward with regionalization, we would then do this whole project's being called a phase 1 project. So I guess it'd be there's a phase 1.0 and then a phase 1.1. But if we regionalize, there's a lot of things we want to do. So, we've got to do some upgrades to the headworks and the air piping and filtration and things regardless.
So if the terms essentially say that they're gonna execute the execution they're referring to in the terms of 0.3 is that both parties are gonna pay for basically the study. And it says a successful completion and acceptance of work or not work. So now I'm a little confused on that. And the end date, which you said it's temporary, which would be December 31st, 2023. So what is it referring to in terms of completion and acceptance of what work? I thought this was just a study. So forgive me of my ignorance.
I apologize, which document are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the
The actual
agreement between the city. Yeah, I'm sorry. And beyond the now therefore,
So the work in this case would be the FCS group's study.
so, well, either way, it's gonna be accepted. It says acceptance of work or not, so I guess I'm just confused exactly. Again, I'm simple. Sorry, I'm simple. What exactly is this $23,000, $300 obligating us to?
It's obligating us to pay for our half of a study to look at what rates might be.
If we are utility customer of Walla Walla.
If we end up doing. Yeah, essentially,
Cost,
it is.
cost of the pipe, cost of being a utility unit, okay. All right, if I understood that correctly, my 2 cents, I'm kind of agreeing with them in the sense of like, I'm pretty sure we were pretty solid in not being a utility customer of them. And then
My
If I-
thoughts are we either do a regionalization or we're staying with our own system and upgrading it. And it seems like we're looking at a rate study for a scenario which we're not considering.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
If
I
I
don't
understood
think I can
correctly,
support this.
yeah.
And I know you're just delivering, we know you're just.
Yeah,
delivering.
Messenger. Yeah, no, Mayor, I would agree there, yes.
I get it.
Okay, all right, so, Councilmember Sherman, any questions or comments? And
Yeah, I guess on the flip side of this, by the way, Melody, I always love it when you're here. Thank you for being super smart. But does participating in this study buy us time in this timeline? Would there be any incentive to say, like, if we do this, this is progressing us? Not, even if it's not the way that we're going to go. Is it something that helps us avoid an upcoming deadline?
I don't know. I don't know that I have an answer to that. I don't
Okay.
think it avoids an upcoming deadline.
Because it doesn't show like, oh, hey, we're making steps in this direction that, you know, hey, we're not going to put $5 million of infrastructure in the ground right now, but we're putting $26,000 into this study, and they say, oh, okay, great, like you're making progress. No.
I don't, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I frankly am considering a motion to table this until we can have Mike
Oh, no.
and
I mean, I
David,
for
because-
sure am.
Because based on what they said at UTAC, I'm pretty sure the answer to that is no. But I haven't like read through all the documents myself. But I certainly left with the impression that the answer would be no.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland?
Can you build off Councilmember Sherman's question? If we are not going this route of being a customer, does this study benefit us if we, as we consider whether or not we are going to be a regional wastewater utility or create a regional wastewater treatment or stay with our current wastewater treatment plant?
I don't know. that
Chime in.
benefit.
You know, having this study will definitely set a baseline. Because probably if you go to a regionalization study, they're not going to look at this as an option. They're just going to look at regionalization. So it'd be interesting to know what would Walla Walla charge us if we were a customer. And being that they're sharing in half the cost, at least we're not having to do the study, 100% on our own. It would definitely give some numbers for any future analysis, see if it came to regionalization or any other options we'd have to know, well, this is what it was going to cost us here. Maybe it's cheaper than doing regionalization. I think it just would give us it would give us a good base to move forward.
I mean, I think the whole concern with becoming a customer is that they could, jack up the prices in the future. But also if we do this study, we're not committing to being a customer.
Correct.
We're really just getting information. So I kind of agree with
trying
you.
to determine what the rate would be.
Right.
In the different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it's a good rate, didn't we kind of decide that even if it's a good rate, we don't want to go on as a customer? So if that's the only numbers and data that we're getting from this study, isn't it kind of irrelevant?
Kind of my thoughts. If this study had benefit in the sense of this would be extremely close to what the cost would be if it was a regional utility, I say, well, that could have benefit, and if it aids a future study into whether or not, or in the cost and what it would take to create a regional thing, then I would see value in it. But until I kind of have a specific answer to what value does this provide to the choice, if informing us around the choice of doing the regional study or remaining with our own, I don't think I can support it. So I'm kind of leaning towards Merity's suggestion of tabling this. And well, if there's any further discussion.
Well, Councilmember Boyle, do you have any additional discussion?
No, I kind of agree. If it's not going to at least buy us some time on those timelines that we have and our deadlines, I struggle to see the value in it.
A motion to table this item.
We have a
Second.
motion. We have a first and
Councilmember
second.
Williams.
Any other motions? All right, let's vote on the motion to table this discussion item. All in favor, say aye.
Hi,
Councilmember Sherman.
Councilmember.
Aye.
All right. Okay. So any opposed? All right, unanimous, the ayes have it, and this discussion is tabled. Thank you, we appreciate you answering all the questions.
No, no problem. I apologize. I don't have answers to all the
No,
questions.
you answered what we, We don't
You
either.
have 7 people's brains going in their head with questions.
I will say, I will take this back to Walla and make it very clear to them that we're not. Council made it clear they're not interested in becoming a customer, so let's relook at this and see if there's an alternative way to move forward.
Thank you.
It just puts us too much at risk, unknown for the future to be a customer, puts us in a situation where we'll be stuck. But yes, again, thank you so much for that.
Not a problem.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, last on the action agenda is the sleep center support. Ms. Colwell's going to report on that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. About a month ago, we talked about enforcing no camping on public property, no staying overnight on public property. And we have a couple tools that we can use, park closure hours, and then the trespass laws. But in order to enforce such codes, we have to have an option for individuals to have emergency shelter. And Mike and I, we recommend that we support the Walla Walla Sleep Center with the amount of $2,000, which has been already budgeted in this year's budget. I've provided, I believe, yes, the MOU that's been executed by the Sleep Center to make those spaces available to people experiencing homelessness in College Place. And I do know that our law enforcement officers already refer people to the Sleep Center, so this will put our support on paper.
Do you know, do we transport people to the sleep center, or do we just make them aware of it?
I do not know the answer to
Okay.
that. My guess would be that we do, if there's no other option for transportation, that could be arranged. And that's just from experience with working with law enforcement officers. Someone needs a ride somewhere.
Sure, okay. Let's go to the Councilmember Jessup, questions or comments?
No, thank you. I remember the discussion. I think if I remember correctly, it all encompasses even the school campuses that are in the city. Thanks.
Councilmember Cleveland?
Something that I'd kind of like to see, it doesn't have to be now, but would be kind of like the protocol around, each step of the process with, law enforcement finding individual camping in the park or in another public space. Kind of what steps they take in getting that person to the sleep center, or just how what the process looks like from start to end.
Absolutely. Can get that information for you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
I agree. I'd like to, know the process, but I think this is clearly an important part of. I don't think it's fair to enforce it unless we have something like this set up, so.
I don't think it's legal.
Councilmember Sherman?
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Boyle?
No questions.
All right, if there's no further discussion, do we have a motion on this MOU?
I'll make a motion to approve MOU with Walla Walla Sleep Center to authorize the city administrator to execute the MOU and to direct payment of $2,000 to the Walla Walla Sleep Center.
I'll second.
Any additional discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is passed. Thank you for that. Well, we kind of breezed through it almost. Okay, administrative reports are up next, and let's see, we have 4 administrative reports tonight. Mr. McAndrews will present on the Garrison Village traffic circle signage.
Yes.
That.
So the city of College Place, take a step back. Most of Garrison Village and Garrison Village Way is private. The exception is it's College Place right away from Myra Road to the traffic circle or roundabout. And the roads around that circle at the east end of Garrison Villages are, the circle around it are city roads, but all the spurs off of that, with the exception of heading towards Myra, are private. So it was brought to our attention, had a couple people ask questions about the fact that there is a stop sign if you're coming from Myra heading westbound on Garrison Villages Way, when you come up to that roundabout. And we looked at it and thought, well, that seems odd. You typically going into a roundabout, there's a yield sign. So we engaged JV engineers and the traffic engineers to do a little bit of a study and make a recommendation. And so that recommendation that they made was to remove that stop sign and to replace it with the yield sign. So last week, I think it was, we brought this to UTAC and they supported it. And so this is kind of the first time we're bringing it to council. So I just wanted to open it up for any questions that you might have.
Okay. Councilmember Jessup,
No, thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland,
No question.
Councilmember Williams,
No questions. That is what we recommended.
Councilmember Sherman,
I don't have any questions. This one seems like, or I guess my only question when I was looking through this the other day was, why is this a council action? It's just think, but I get it. I get it. It's just silly.
I believe in the past, there have been things that we've made some traffic improvements that ended up controversial. And so
Yeah.
some of these more substantial ones, we want to make sure we have council support. So,
makes sense.
Who objects to the yield instead of a stop?
right.
Councilmember Boyle.
Looks like it makes sense to me.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Next is the intergovernmental agreement for cooperative countywide planning policies update. Mr. Rickard,
I think we skipped.
did I miss what's up in?
I got one more. I know.
Yeah, on the intersection, always stops.
All right, let's go to the, it's not on my, at least I don't see it. It's okay. Let's go to the Whitman Academy intersection, always stop control.
So
Okay,
similarly to the last one, that was the Garrison Village traffic circle signage. There has been some complaints and requests about the intersection at Whitman and Academy. Right now, there's a stop sign on Academy if you're heading north, and on Hussey, it's Hussey Street to the north, which is a county road that comes into Whitman. So that intersection, there's been some concerns with its proximity to the school.
yes.
We asked JUV again to do a study. Their study ultimately said, you know, there really isn't anything that is specifically warranted or required, but it would be still a good idea to install or to turn that intersection into an always stop and to include flashing stop signs on the Whitman legs of it. Similarly to what we did at Whitman and Larch, and the stop signs that we have at Larch and 12. Again, we took this to UTAC last week and they supported this action and recommended council approval. So, and again, this is kind of the first time we're bringing it to council, so it's just an administrative report. Hoping you guys might have questions or might not.
Well, if I recollect some of the phone calls and emails that I've received on this topic, is that specifically during school start and school end, there's a lot going on between traffic and bicyclists and cars that are not paying attention and going through fast. And so some of the neighbors had some concerns about close misses, and their parents did, the cars just aren't stopping, and or they're stopping for kids and not paying attention that there's a bicyclist there. And so there was just too much going on this, if I recollect.
And there's some line of sight concerns with existing conditions that if traffic at all directions were to come to a stop, you wouldn't have the same line of sight concerns. Excuse me.
Councilmember Jessup.
I'm not trying to stir the pot for anybody, but legit, isn't this, we're Is it county or is it city where that property has those big giant evergreens that kind of like covers that line of sight there in the corner on
the north,
the northwest corner?
that is in the county.
That's the county?
And I've had discussions with the county and they come out from time to time and trim to the extent they're able, but I believe they're private bushes in the county. So the county public works guys can only do so much.
If I recall, they're supposed to be 10 feet.
What's that?
If I recall, it's supposed to be 10 feet away from the road. Because we've had friends and neighbors who neighbors have called on people, and so it seems to me that there's a visual problem. It's 15-foot bush, 10 feet wide, that's not 10 feet away from the road. Now, again, you're not the one in charge of it, I get it, but anyway, I'm just kind of,
It's a good point.
I'm just kind of throwing that out there. If there's visual issues, it seems to me that's massive trees that you can't see around while people are driving on Whitman Drive might be, I don't know, just throw it out there, it might be a factor,
Sure.
so.
I mean, we have rules like that, don't we, about corner? shrubs around
We have
corners?
line of sight regulations in our municipal code, and we do our best to enforce those, especially with when people are planting new trees or putting up new fences or building
Sure.
new things, changing the conditions. It does get a little confusing when you get onto a county city border and whose line of sight rules regulate which part of the corner.
Is this a part of the blue zone safe path to school section area? I don't know if they get to be involved in that.
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is because it's a private school,
Right.
it doesn't qualify for some of the safe route to school grant monies because it's private, not public, I believe.
That'd be pretty nice. Okay.
Yeah, with
Oh, thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
So kind of up Whitman towards the east of here, there's Garrison Middle School, there's a couple intersections there, any safety concerns or stop sign concerns around there?
Davis.
Or yeah, Davis, sorry.
Okay, so.
It's not that- I'm going with you. What am I gonna say?
Me too. It's like, I'm trying to picture it in my head.
Did I miss the workshop?
Well, it's like, do we care? I mean, just our problem here right now.
So your question is, are there
Are there any safety concerns up the road of Whitman by Davis?
Not specifically that I'm aware of. We have increased our school crossing signage in that area in the last year or so. I think the biggest concerns that exist there is the traffic entry and exiting Davis off of Ash. And that's another one that we are kind of looking at and paying attention to, and may have a recommendation in the future for a change as well, but as far as intersections go, not that have been brought to my attention or that I'm aware of.
I think all I hear is that people tend to park while they're waiting for their kids in the intersection, kind of, you know, right at the corners. That's what I hear a lot with the buses as well. Councilmember Williams.
I remembered after our UTAC meeting, in the engineer's report, there said that there hadn't been any pedestrian accidents at that corner. And I think part of the reason is, at least when my kids were in school there, all the parents that lived on the other side of Whitman would not let their kids walk or ride their bikes to Rogers or even Wava. They just felt like it was too dangerous. So I think that may be kind of something that affected it, is people thought it was too dangerous. So I support this. But that's just another tidbit.
And to add to that, I have heard that from people that have called multiple times, that it's just a well-known thing allegedly that if you live north of Whitman, you don't let your kids walk to school, and if you live south of Whitman, it's safe. So.
Councilmember Sherman,
I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Councilmember Boyle.
No questions. Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, John, sorry about that. You are up for the intergovernment agreement for cooperative countywide planning policies update.
All right, yeah, so the county of Walla Walla, Waitsburg, Prescott, City of Walla Walla, and City of College Place planning staff and legal staff have been working on this interlocal agreement. Gone back, had a few iterations of it, and we have all settled on a final, and we are all taking this to our councils or elected officials for to move forward on an interlocal agreement to update the countywide planning policies, which haven't been done really a major overhaul since they were adopted in '93. There was a small tweak of a couple of things in 2005. This is really what's going to lay the groundwork for how we do our population allocation, our growth, employment projections, our housing need projections, land capacity analysis. So this is a big step in the process, is to get this in a local agreement in place. What we're working on in the interim, while this is being approved by the elected officials, is the RFP process, putting together an RFP to hire a consultant. The agreement has in it that each jurisdiction will have up to three representatives, excuse me, will make up the policy board essentially. And so from College Place, I believe our thought is that the mayor and then two staff people, so Mike Vitello and myself would be make up that for College Place. Plus, we will also have Greg Dorn and Dorn and Associates providing us with advice as well along the way. So as we work through the process, there'll be public meetings, of course, and probably some workshops with the councils at some point. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll bring this back to you at the next council meeting for approval.
This is actually pretty exciting.
It is very exciting. It's been
It's a big step.
big step. Yeah.
Thanks for working on it.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought somebody was gonna say something up here. Councilmember Jessup,
No, thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland,
No question.
Councilmember Williams.
Sorry, no questions. I'm almost as excited as John is.
Councilmember Sherman,
No questions.
Councilmember Boyle.
No questions. Thanks.
All right, thank you. It's good news moving forward on this. Although we have a skeptic in our room.
Not hold my breath.
All right, so lastly, we have the unlawful camping code, and Ms. Colwell will.
Yes, thank you. So this is before you today because it's kind of a magic mix of things happening in City Hall. One being we wanted to support the Sleep Center, which we brought forward to you. Another one was our code enforcement officer, Ron Norman, realized that a time limit on how long someone can reside in an RV on their own property. We had some timeframes, duration, and then so much within so many months. And that got omitted the last time we did our uniform development code updates. And so we looked into how can we ensure, that our public is going to be safe by living and residing in safe dwellings. And that kind of led us to, we actually don't have an ordinance or a code section that makes it unlawful for individuals to camp on public property or to store personal items on public property. And part of that, I think, thank goodness, is that we haven't had issues yet with people making public property unsafe or unsuitable for the intended purposes of that public property. So right now, as it stands, you cannot reside, you cannot stay overnight in any vehicle parked on a public street, parked in the right of way. We have park hours, so we can enforce getting people out of parks that are in park hours. And then we can trespass people if they are obstructing any use of public place or they're obstructing a right of way. And so what I provided to you by way of not having a lot of time to put things together is Walla Walla's code. It talks about, for those of you that haven't delved into it, it talks about certain timeframes and dates and months. And I reached out to Walla Walla to ask why they did that, but I'm thinking it has to do with the sleep center hours and when the sleep center is open. And also due to the fact that I think they allow some camping on some of their public property to accommodate people who do not have a place to live. So those are those reasons. So when I present this to you the next time, my recommendation is going to be to simplify the code and basically make it illegal to, or make it unlawful to camp on public property. Make it unlawful to store personal property in public areas. To prohibit the use of RVs, motorhomes, trailers, boats, that type of thing to reside in. But to make a catch-all that one, the city administrator or the mayor or both can permit camping. If we got in a situation for whatever reason where we had a homeless population that couldn't be housed anywhere, we might want to allow them to camp or sleep overnight. So allow that to be done on a case-by-case basis with certain rules. And then to have a suspension of enforcing anti-camping when there is no shelter available. So really, this is kind of a preventative code. We hope we don't have to use it, but that's going to be the recommendations. And then I'd like to take any concerns or comments, direction from council in actually drafting our code.
Councilmember Jessup,
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
So I was just kind of perusing through this. So if a person is destitute, we can't just make it illegal to be homeless. We have to have a place for them to go. So if someone is either passing through or all they have is their trailer, are we effectively saying, well, is it my understanding that they can't park the recreational vehicle anywhere in the city of College Place?
Not sleeping.
Yeah, you can't sleep, so if you park it on the street, you cannot sleep in it. If it's parked in someone's driveway, you can. Right now, what we removed out of the code was, I think, do you remember, John? I can't remember if it was, you can stay for 5 nights and it can only be 5 times in a 12-month period or something like that. It accommodated for when, grandma and grandpa come over and they stay for a week on your own property. We accommodated that, but we want to make sure residents that people are living in are safe. And being in a mobile home with, electric cords and no sewer and things like that is what we are trying to prevent when we talk about not allowing people to reside in a trailer or a mobile home.
This wouldn't prohibit Walmart from allowing people to camp in their parking lot.
It would not.
Is that the same for, let's say, like the church? Wanted to say they can camp in our parking lot.
Yes.
Yes, it would, or?
Oh, I'm sorry. It would not prohibit.
Okay,
It would
sorry.
not prohibit if, we had an apartment fire and they wanted to set up shelter in the parking lot.
Sure.
No
Okay.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think on this some, but I would kind of think that least provisionally at this point, that if someone wants to visit with the trailer, but they don't want to have to pay for a specific place to park it, or if they don't have a friend local that has space on their property, we're essentially saying, get out.
Well, you mean if they're staying, like if they're staying in a hotel, they can park it over in a hotel.
Well, they'd have to pay to stay here. That's what I'm
Sure.
saying. So there's a cost associated if you visit it with an RV of some sort.
And we could put in, it's unlawful to reside in a trailer for more than whatever amount of days on the street.
Yeah, I think I would
Yeah.
lean towards that, at
Yeah.
least at this point, but without doing a whole lot of thinking on it, but I don't know if, others have opinions either for or against.
Let's hear it. Councilmember Williams?
I've known two families who lived in their RV while they were building their house. One, their house was condemned and because of mold and stuff, and so they tore it down and they had an RV on their lot, not on the street, for like 2 years while they built a new house. The other one, they sold their house and they were building their house, which took 9 months or so, and they lived in the in-laws driveway in their RV. And so I don't know that I necessarily want to encourage that, but the one was not in the driveway, it was just like on yard. How would that be affected by this?
Well, under our current code, it would not be legal to live in your RV, correct, John?
So I think the issue that Ron Nordman raised is that under our previous development code, you were restricted, it was, I want to say it was 14 days in a calendar year. So that allowed you to have company come visit, they had to park it on your property in your driveway or in your backyard or something. So it was per individual, so whoever the trailer or the RV was licensed to was allowed to stay on private property for up to 14 days. Our current code, I believe, mistakenly omitted the 14 days in a calendar year. It just says you're limited to 14 days. So that means day 15, you go down and camp out in Walmart parking lot, and then you drive back the next day to your friend's property.
Right.
And yeah, we have had some, I know people ask about the ability to stay in an RV while they're building a house or renovating their house. And the answer in the past has always been, that's not legal. Now, maybe it's happened. Maybe it hasn't.
There's so many little things connected with that,
Yeah,
right?
there
There's sewer, there's water, electrical, garbage. All that. Councilmember Jessup and then Councilmember Cleveland.
Yeah, this goes back to my ignorance on the experiences with it, but is there like city liabilities if it's RVs parked or somebody's in their car or on city streets and city parks, and if something happens, there's a fire and it catches somebody else or whatever, is there, if we don't have this in place, is there city liability in some sort?
Well, there's almost always liability.
Oh,
Yeah, so I guess
So-
my question is
Somebody
that,
will.
what is this covering?
Right.
Sorry, what is this covering?
So,
Table.
so, no, I would say generally, no. The city owes a duty to the public as a whole and not to an individual. So we can't be held liable for damage to an individual. Generally, that's called the public duty doctrine. There are exceptions, and our Supreme Court really likes to find exceptions to hold cities and counties liable. An exception would be is if we promised, the neighbor complains because this person's living in the RV and their trash is piling up, and we say, we're gonna take care of it, don't you worry about it, we're gonna clean it up. we don't, a fire breaks out and burns down their house, we absolutely would be liable for that. So don't make any promises. But, what the prohibition against people living in motorhomes, it's a health and safety issue. It is a fire, sewer, trash. It's a health hazard. We want people to live in habitable homes. So laws that we pass never fit real life scenario to the best, you know, that you just can't do it. You're either over inclusive or under inclusive. So I would say in practice that I don't think I think most of our code enforcement is we receive a complaint, we go investigate. We don't have a code enforcement officer driving around looking for violations. Does that mean if we found one, we wouldn't do anything about it? No, it's a discretion. Law enforcement or code enforcement officer has discretion, but we're not generally liable if we didn't have an ordinance in there, or we weren't protecting the public from themselves. That's not something that we would be liable.
I would just add that it comes back to quality of life. What do we want our community to look like? And so, you know, you use zoning to regulate that to some degree. Where you mentioned sewer, you know, connections of these, our utility, our sewer code actually, I think, limits it or doesn't allow RV connections on private, on individual residential lots. So that's a whole nother like can of worms, you know, there are ways around that. I mean, people can haul it themselves.
And something I could look into, I don't know if maybe it's a special permit to allow someone to live in motorhome and we put restrictions on it. You have to, you know, have a garbage can or you have to do whatever. That's something, I mean, I can research that, John, and I can research that.
That was actually going to be kind of my comment. I had a relative who, while they were searching for a house, was staying on another relative's property in a recreational trailer. And I would think that, you know, we might have, say, you know, like you could be you park on the street in an RV for like 5 days. You could park on a private property for 5 days. Beyond that, though, you need to get a permit and be subject to some sort of inspection, because I don't want to outlaw someone who's in a position like my relative was, where they have a family, they have their work is in a specific area, they don't have housing options, but they did have access to, you know, the home, but their primary residence was in the RV while they were searching for their own home to buy in a tough market. So
Well, this is the personal story, my house in Walla Walla, when COVID hit, our neighbors kind of around the corner from us, but right next to us, his son and daughter-in-law were in between houses. And I mean, everything was chaotic and they brought in a trailer and fenced it off, and that was their home for probably 2 years. And I absolutely know it was not appropriate, but you know, I'm not going to complain. They need a place to live, right? So maybe there's something we can
I
work
just
on.
like a legal avenue.
Yeah.
That's so, you know, someone can get a permit. They could, you know, presume the place is safe and habitable. You know, that's an option. I just don't want to make, you know, being in a difficult life situation illegal.
Right.
Parking on the streets is tricky though, because if they're gonna start to say, so first of all, we have
Well,
regulations of where anybody can park on public street, but then, well, what about my car? I don't have an RV, you're gonna discriminate me sleeping in my car for 3 weeks? See, it can happen to open a can of worms.
There's traffic laws. I mean, I think we've had this discussion at some point regarding large vehicles parked in the right of ways and visibility triangles, and we do have traffic
Code for that,
code
correct.
for that. But the other issue too is that a lot of even if it's just like, you know, company coming to stay to town, and it's not even like somebody that's like destitute or homeless. These RVs are getting bigger and bigger, and they almost all have bump outs on them. So now you're not talking about just like an 8-foot wide vehicle, you're talking about, you know, 12 feet or whatever, however wide it gets. I mean, it could be even wider and then bump outs on both sides in some instances, so
And their
it
little awnings and their.
really could become a public safety issue and very challenging to, I mean, who's issuing those permits and, I mean, I get what you're saying.
Do
Well,
we
it-
have
it-
RV parking somewhere in the city? I know Walla Walla has RV
So-
parking spaces downtown.
We don't have like an RV park, but we do our code, we do have like Country Estates has RV stalls for the long-term tenants to live in RVs. While it's limited, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 spaces available.
But it sounds to me, without a code of provision, we have no avenue to investigate someone who's in an inhabitable or unsafe home. But if we do have this provision, there is still code enforcement discretion to go, oh, you're looking for a home. Yeah, the awning's unsafe, move it. But if we don't have the code, we have no avenue to help somebody. So the permit thing makes sense. Except for it's one of those ones, you don't want to paint yourself in a corner.
But it's
You want to allow to be broad stroked enough to say, well, they're gonna allow the law enforcement, allow the code enforcement to have discretion, see the difference between unsafe environment and safe environment. So the more we put into it, the more restricted they're going to be able to make those individualistic and or those decisions.
And I have no idea how access to service happens, but it seems like it would be good if somehow the quote unquote permit was administered by somebody like Blue Mountain Action Council. So they could go in and say, hey, we need a permit to live, in an RV in Melody's backyard. And they're like, well, have you looked into these options? And so the people are aware of what housing options they may have that they may not be aware of.
Is this something that perhaps you could direct me to bring back to a workshop? We can flesh it out and I can get some more examples of what other cities in our,
Sounds like a good workshop topic.
in our.
Yeah.
Our house. Okay, I'm happy to do that.
I'm from Seattle, that makes me really nervous.
We sound like a theater company. Let's workshop this. But yes, I think it's a good idea.
Decisions to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sherman or Boyle?
No questions, thanks.
Nope.
All right. Yeah, that's a lot of considerations. All right. Let's see. Thank you so much for that. It's great conversation,
Yeah,
great things for us to start to think about. All right, there's no informational reports today. There's no executive session, and we're down to closing items. Is there any other business for good of the order? All right. Is there a motion to conclude the meeting? I can think of something else to talk about if everybody wants to go home.
Me too.
Jinx and I move to conclude the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so if there's no objections, the meeting is concluded at 8:44 p.m.
Bye.
Thank you all. Appreciate you being here. Bye-bye.